If you've been watching our videos for a while, you probably know that we consider the Battle of Umbaran to have been one of Star Wars: The Clone Wars' best arcs. It was dark and gritty. It was a much grimmer take on warfare than we're used to in Star Wars, and most importantly, it focused on the clones of the 501st Legion. When watching the arc, we're always rooting for the clones as they struggle against the traitorous General Krell and the separatist Umbarans. But let's take a step back for a moment. Were the Umbarans really the bad guys? We don't think so. In this video, we're going to explain why the Umbarans did nothing wrong.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The Battle of Umbaran was one of the biggest battles of the Clone Wars, a planetary scale invasion that involved multiple elite clone units. The Grand Army of the Republic put a lot of effort into recapturing Umbaran, and they still struggled to take the planet. The native Umbarans resisted fiercely, using guerrilla tactics and their superior technology to great effect against the clones. In the end, the Republic was victorious, but the Umbarans made them pay dearly for the victory. When analysing a battle, the first question one should ask is what both sides were fighting for. This question is actually answered outright in the opening sequence of the Umbaran arc's first episode, albeit in an abbreviated and easy to miss fashion. The Republic wanted to recapture Umbaran to reopen trade routes in the expansion region where Umbaran was located. Umbaran had seceded a few weeks before the battle after having originally sided with the Republic at the start of the Clone Wars, and its secession was a serious threat to Republic supply lines. There's more to this motive than the episode mentions, however. Umbaran wasn't located along any old hyperspace route. It was on the Great Kashyyyk branch, one of the most important routes to cross the expansion region. Its secession all but cut the Republic off from Kashyyyk, one of the Mid-Rim's most important worlds. Kashyyyk supported the Republic, but Umbaran's secession meant the Republic would be unable to defend it properly if the Separatists tried to capture it or pressure it into secession. The latter possibility was even more devastating than the former, since many Mid-Rim worlds took Kashyyyk's lead in politics. Umbaran's secession could have allowed the Separatists to tighten the vice on Kashyyyk, cutting off its imports and forcing it to secede, something that would have meant the secession of most of the Mid-Rim. That's why the Republic was so invested in taking Umbaran. It was purely a tactical move. But what about the Umbarans? What were they fighting for? To answer that question, we need to look at why the Umbarans seceded in the first place. After all, they were staunch loyalists at the start of the Clone Wars. Their senator, Geetsly, was one of the Galactic Senate's leading militarists, and he was very popular back home. Umbaran's secession was such a sudden and massive change in direction that it was a miracle the planet's leadership didn't get a whiplash from it. What made the Umbarans change their minds in such a huge way? The answer is a vibroblade, specifically the vibroblade that ended up lodged in Senator Geetsly's back. In 21 BBY, Umbaran's senator was murdered as part of a larger plot that also killed Senator Onaconda Farr of Rhodia. As we just mentioned earlier, the Umbarans were big fans of Geetsly, and they were livid when he was killed. As far as the Umbarans saw it, Geetsly hadn't done anything wrong or foolish, and certainly nothing to get himself killed. He was murdered because of his political views. To the Umbarans, the whole thing was a wake-up call to how utterly corrupt the Senate had become. Geetsly's murder radicalized the Umbarans, serving as proof of what the Separatists had been saying all along. The Republic, and the Senate in particular, was hopelessly corrupt. To paraphrase Count Dooku, the Republic was beyond repair, and it was time to start over. Now, it's true that the Confederacy probably used Umbaran for its own ends once the planet seceded, and the planet's ruling caste, the Rutai, probably had some self-serving goal in mind when they approved of the secession. But for most Umbarans, they were breaking from the Republic for the same reasons thousands of other worlds had. The Republic was corrupt and mistreated them, and they weren't willing to stand for it any longer. Like many separatist populations, the Umbarans probably didn't care much for the Separatist Council or the Confederacy's corporate benefactors, but the Confederacy didn't let their representatives in Parliament get murdered, and that was an improvement, at least. That was a perfectly reasonable motive. The Republic really was hopelessly corrupt, and by the time battle broke out on Umbaran, it had already become an empire in all but name. The Umbarans owed the Republic nothing, while the Republic had neglected them, so they chose to leave. Granted, the Confederacy wasn't all that much better than the Republic, but it wasn't nearly as overbearing on most of its member worlds, and in any event, secession from a corrupt, increasingly fascist Republic was a pretty sensible choice. As we've discussed in an older video, there was no good side in the Clone Wars. The Republic, the Confederacy, and pretty much all major third parties were absolutely awful. If anything, both sides of the Clone Wars were decidedly evil, but there were systems and individuals with good reasons to support one side or the other. Many loyalists supported the Republic because they hoped the Republic could be reformed from within, while many separatists supported the Confederacy because it protected them from the oppression of the core worlds. With all things considered, Umbaran was one of the worlds that was right to choose the separatists. Of course, the Republic invaded Umbaran anyway. It didn't care about frivolous things like corruption, independence, or self-determination. It had a war to win, and it wasn't about to let the Umbarans cost it the mid-rim. Despite supposedly standing for freedom and democracy, the Republic utterly disregarded the clear choice of the Umbaran people and tried to bring it back into the fold by force. That, for the record, isn't something a Republic is supposed to do. The invasion of Umbaran was much more akin to the work of the Empire. When we watch the Umbaran arc, it's easy to see the story as one of brave clone troopers battling treacherous, shadowy villains, but the reality wasn't nearly as righteous. The clones were invaders, trespassers on someone else's homeworld. They attacked the locals and besieged their homes, and when the fighting was done, they occupied the planet and likely put it under martial law. Unlike in the Clone Wars era battles, the clones didn't have any righteous motives for doing this. They were just securing trade routes and violently suppressing a whole planet to do so. No wonder the Umbarans fought back so fiercely. The clones may have been fighting for supply lines, but the Umbarans were fighting for their home. They resisted to the bitter end despite the relative lack of separatist reinforcements on the ground, and they continued to resist after the Republic was victorious, according to the canon Thrawn novels. That's because they knew that Umbaran didn't belong to the Republic, and it didn't belong to the Confederacy either. It belonged to the Umbarans. They had a right to self-determination, and the Republic was trying to take that away from them. Moreover, the Umbarans didn't really do anything terrible to the clones either. Their tactics were unorthodox, sure, but everything they did was in accordance with the laws of warfare and all. Hell, the Republic's own general was much crueler to his men than the Umbarans were, and the Umbarans had every right to let loose against the invaders. Within the scope of the Battle of Umbaran, the Umbarans did absolutely nothing wrong. The clones we know and love were the real bad guys in that campaign. So that's why we think the Umbarans did nothing wrong. But what do you think? Do you agree with us, or do you still support the Republic over the Umbarans? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.